Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to everybody. Usually when I speak publicly, I prefer not to read, but I do that when I speak my language, Italian. Now, speaking English, I prefer to read my intervention. I apologize for that, but I hope not to be so boring. In this current century, and partially at the end of the past one, we have seen two main kinds of warfare. The traditional ones, where states struggle through their respective armies, and the asymmetric ones, where irregular forces, insurgents or terrorists, face themselves against third regular armies or against civilians. YALTA, POTSDAM, HELSINKI had been pacts aimed to end traditional wars and to agree on the condition to settle a new order among the states. This was possible because the actors that participated to those negotiations were organized subjects. They were composed, apparently at least, by people of goodwill. It is now impossible to imagine such a kind of settlement with terroristic or insurgent groups, because in most of cases, even when willing, they have no official authority over population and over countries where they are fighting in. Any engagement they might assume, apart from the end of conflicts, has no possibility to be fulfilled concretely. On the contrary, the Helsinki Act in 1975 was suitable to all participants, and its enforcement was granted by the balance of powers between the two blocs that were sharing at that time the control of large part of the world. Years later, in 1990, the political and military balance changed. The pact was updated in Paris, keeping into consideration the end of the so-called Iron Curtain. The new agreement had been named Charter of Paris for a New Europe. Both treaties confirmed and integrated their reciprocal engagement, stating in particular, 1. Respect of other sovereignties. 2. No use of force against the territorial integrity and political independence of any member. 3. Borders inviolability. 4. No intervention in others' internal affairs. Unfortunately, the undersigned agreements had not been respected very soon, and the war against Serbia, as Ambassador of Canada demonstrated a few minutes ago, was an example of not respecting these reciprocal engagements. Since that moment, the principle of the two documents have been invoked only as an instrument of propaganda, and the double standard became usual. Propaganda has commonly been used in the centuries for motivating friends, discouraging enemies, and also infiltrating enemies' society during traditional wars. The invention and the large diffusion of radios, TVs, broadcasting by satellite, and internet increased the way of confrontation. The fast and easy moving by the modern means of transportation added other possibility. Helsinki and Paris were conceived at that moment for avoiding or trying to avoid all the traditional wars, and still should be valid to that purpose. However, today, propaganda and infiltration into other states' public opinions have started to be used also without officially declaring or admitting to be in a war. They have become a new unpredictable danger to the stability in any country. It happens in the world. Even when the existence of traditional wars is constantly denied, this shifty way of acting is more and more used And we have a lot of examples of this kind in Europe and surrounding. More and more, some foreign country that we could name creates or applies to private organization, the so-called NGOs, or something similar to that, internal to other states for destabilizing its institution and life. This is a new great danger for the peace. We spoke about the terrorist way of using asymmetric way of war, but also we have, and we must be aware that we are facing another kind of asymmetric war when a foreign state, even denying it officially, interferes against the stability of another country. The most evident risk for peace in Europe today looks to be the terroristic action, and indeed it is a big risk for Europe, for any state of Europe. We saw that recently, very recently in Paris. But notwithstanding that, at the moment where it becomes more and more frequent, the foreign financing of groups that wants to feed artificial dissatisfaction with local government, promote disorders in the squares, expressly act in order to provoke the police reaction. At that moment, we are in front of a new great danger for the stability of all the continent. It is less evident in its causes, but equally dangerous. Very frankly, we know that the so-called color revolutions that we saw in some European, and not only European countries, were in large part suggested, trained, and organized by third countries for their own political purpose. It is not a pure suggestion. I think that everybody was able, for example, to listen to the telephone voice of Mrs. Nuland from the American Department of State when she was saying how much his government had already paid in dollars for feeding what was happening in those days in Kiev. For sure, these methods can be utilized by any country, not only by those that are already utilizing that, but any country can use these methods. It is not difficult to find out in any society someone that for personal dissatisfaction, for ideological reasons, or also for pure money, is ready to put himself at the service of foreign interests. But we should ask ourselves, where can we arrive if we accept that logic? The purpose of Helsinki was to guarantee to all signatory powers the respect of their status and independence. What is particularly important was that every and each country had the same dignity of the others, and its place in the world was accepted and undisputed. Today, it looks that we are no longer respectful of others' dignity, and it should have been after Helsinki and Paris, as it should have been after Helsinki and Paris. If we really want, not only by words, but also in the fact, to achieve and maintain a real stability, to realize a real peace in our continent and in the world, we must strongly condemn the above-mentioned practices and start thinking how to improve the Act of Helsinki, the Charter of Paris principle, to stop these sly behaviors. Are Washington, Brussels, Moscow, and others ready to understand it? I'm afraid that some one of those mentioned is not. So I think that we should insist and maybe propose by ourselves a meeting expressly on this subject that someone wants even deny that exists. Thank you.